Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Luis Llanes on the line, and he's founder of Wealthnet Investments. Luis, welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here. Let's try to make this positive too. With all this craziness going on in the world, today's going to be a good day. We're going to talk about positivity today, I hope.
Oh man, I'm in for that. And for everybody watching this, they know I'm all about the positivity. And for context, we're recording this in March of 2022. So a lot going on in the world. But what we'll be digging into today will be the financial freedom blueprint. So excited to get into that and also to learn more about WealthNet investments and how you're helping your clients and investors. But before we get into that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Luis, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Luis, what mission matters to you?
Our mission is something very, very simple. We want to help as many people as possible to turn their piece of wealth into peace of mind. Because a lot of people are struggling with wealth, even if they have a lot of money or whether they have a little bit of money.
Yeah.
There is a lot of struggle involved with money, and we really have a big mission to try to help people get over those obstacles and to make smart decisions with their money so that they can live a more full life. And we've outlined some real clear ways that we help people do that. So that is our primary mission in terms of my company, WealthNet.
It's awesome. Love bringing mission-based entrepreneurs and executives on the line to share why they do what they do, like what excites them about the marketplace and the difference that they want to make. So great having you on the show. And I guess just to get us kicked off, before we get into the financial freedom blueprint, and also before we get into WealthNet investments, how did this all begin for you? Like this idea, this passion, and this want to go on this financial track to help people with their wealth.
Okay, so it really starts off when I was really young. My parents never really had very much money,
Mhm.
and we lived in a lower middle class family. I was born in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. We moved to Texas, and it really didn't really have a whole lot of resources financially. And none of my parents or even any of my aunts and uncles or anything went to college. Okay,
Mhm.
so I remember I was really good in music, and I got a scholarship to play music at University of Florida, and I decided not to take it. And my mom was like, "Well, you need to get going. Determine what you want to do with your life."
Yeah.
So I took on odd jobs, and one time I had this construction job, and I remember working really hard, really, really hard. And we worked in these big mansions, and people had all this money. And I was wondering what's different about the people that own these houses. They had, I was making $5 an hour, and they were like really, really wealthy.
Yeah.
And one day, my grandfather said, I'll let you rent one of my houses.
Mhm.
And it was a really, in a bad neighborhood. And so I got into this house. I was lucky enough to rent this house at a very low price. My grandfather was so gracious to do that.
Yeah.
And there was nothing at all in the house except this box. And in that box were some books. And on the top was this book. It was a bright green book. I'll never forget it. The title was Microeconomics, and it had these graphs. I could literally draw the graph for you.
Yeah.
And I cracked it open, and I realized that was it. That's what I
Mhm.
didn't understand. I didn't know supply and demand. I didn't understand how money works. And I didn't, that was what was needed, was education. I immediately stopped what I was doing. I did whatever I could to back to college, and I got a degree in finance,
Mhm.
and it went off to get an MBA and a CFA and all these other accolades or, designations, whatever. But that's really what happened is I realized that there's so many people like me who maybe they didn't have all of the things that were the education and support that's necessary to learn how to make money work for you. And I was determined to actually find out. And that's really how I got involved.
I didn't realize that our backgrounds were so similar. I know we've talked before, but I mean, that's much, very, very like the way that I started in finance. So I've been in media now for a long time, full time, but I had almost 14 years in that industry. And I remember being really young and asking my parents maybe some questions about money that they didn't know. And they were
Mhm.
quite frank to say, "Hey, Adam, we're not the ones. We can advise you and we can give you advice on some other things, but like we don't really know how this money thing works. Like, and I'll other
Mhm.
words, but that's what they told me. And so I
Sure.
remember kind of starting on that path pretty early, both working at a firm in my teenage years, a brokerage firm, and then also just reading and just trying to figure out and understand, and kind of almost thinking of it like a game almost, because I was still young and it wasn't, let's just
Mhm.
say, for keeps, right? I'm still at home. So don't
Sure.
have bills to pay yet, right?
Right.
So I remember going down that path and thinking about like, oh wow, so this is it, there is a knowledge thing, like actual knowledge is missing from certain, whether it's homes, whether it's socioeconomic classes, whether it's just people, whether it's geographies, but there's knowledge missing. And this knowledge
Yeah.
isn't like, rocket science. Like there's actionable things that people can do to improve their lives no matter where they're at. And I think that's a good transition for us to go a little bit further into financial freedom blueprint. I guess
Mhm.
just kind of fast forwarding a bit. What inspired you to go this route of of writing?
Well, throughout the years, and I've been in this business over 2 decades,
Hmm.
well over 2 decades, throughout the years, people always ask the same questions. And, over time, you learn how to solve those questions in a way that works. And I've worked with, people who are mom and pops all the way to CEOs of publicly traded companies, people who
Yeah.
have hundreds of millions of dollars and people have not even $1 million. I mean,
Hmm.
so all walks of life. And what I found is that there's some basic questions that everybody asks. And so I sought a way for us to be able to hand somebody a book and say, read this. And this will help you be more informed. And then you could be a better client of ours and we could deliver better value for you. And if you aren't a client of ours ever, this is still going to help you, and that's why I decided to put it in kind of book format. So that's the basic reason why.
So I may sound like a biased publisher because I am, but why books? Like, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and I personally think that you should go after all different formats. Whether if you can do
Mhm.
video, do video. If you can do podcast, do a podcast. Do something to get the message out there. But I
Right.
am a publisher, and I still like the feel of books. It's still my
Mhm.
impression that people don't throw away books; like they keep them. I have books on my counters. I have books all
Right.
over the place. Like,
Yeah,
why a
I
book?
mean, I've got a copy of the blueprint right here, and you can touch it, you can feel it, you can
Yeah.
go back to things, you could dog ear it, you could write on it, you could, I'm a big believer in books. I still try to get my kids to read books. Google can help you quite a bit, but let's get down. Some of the best information you can get are not just current books, but old books.
Yeah.
Because what you really want to do is you want to capture what is perennially true. And a lot of times these books that were written 100 years ago, 50
Mhm.
years ago, even longer. I mean, take the Bible for example. There
Yeah.
are some things in there that will never change, right?
Mhm.
So I think books are a great medium. With that said, I believe in the other ways as well. I mean, we
Mhm.
have a podcast, for example. So yeah, it's all good.
So let's dig into some of the content in Financial Freedom Blueprint. And obviously, we won't have time to go through it all today. But I do want to give the audience a good taste, because at the of the book, and just what to expect. Because I do
Okay.
want them to grab a copy. At the end of this, I'll give you the opportunity, of course, to leave contact information, websites, wherever the audience can pick up a copy. But let's get into some of the content. So where does it begin?
Well, the book is structured in a way where the first part of it are those basics that I had mentioned to you. There's really 7 key steps that we call the 7 steps to accelerate your path to prosperity. Everybody should do these steps. I
Mm.
think that's the kind of the starting point for the book.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to, we could touch on each one slightly, or however you want to go with it. But there are certain things that if you do these things, it gives you a high probability that you're going to be successful. Whether you have no money or whether you have a lot of money, and you have to really touch on each one of these steps.
And so, I do want to go into a couple of the steps for sure. But
Mhm.
before we do that, you know, a lot of times people can be intimidated by financial books. Like they think they maybe are written, like just the style, the writing. Like maybe they went to school for something other than finance, and they're like, I don't want to pick up a book that I'm gonna have to pick up the dictionary every 2 minutes, or it's not like. Tell me about the writing style and feel. Is this digestible for somebody that maybe is not advanced in finance?
I would say it's 80% digestible for somebody who has no finance. Okay.
Mm.
There are some sections in
So
there.
everybody can read this thing.
Everybody can read this. Yeah, I wanted it to be something that everybody could read, and I try to speak in plain language.
Mhm.
There are a few times when I'll talk about something that's a little more highbrow or technical, but then I'll explain what it is. So hopefully everybody can digest it.
Fantastic. I have to clear the air on that one because sometimes people, as soon as you start bringing up, it's a book on finance or it's a book on, they're like, I don't want to deal with that. I already have to talk about this. So I get it. For anybody that's watching, by the way, if I was reading a book maybe on some other topic that I have no idea on, then I'm the same way. So I'm not picking on you. I'm picking on me on that one.
Well, just
So
along the same lines, just to give you a clue,
yeah.
I put everything in like there's a lot of quotes in there
Mhm.
where there's big quotes so that you could literally go through and just read the quotes and the headlines, and you will get a good percentage of what
Mhm.
the essence is of the book, because I wanted people to be able to digest it easier for
Mhm.
sure.
So let's go into some of those steps. So
Mhm.
maybe let's just start at the first one.
Okay, well, the first step is really simple. You have to identify and prioritize your objectives. What am I trying to do? I mean, that everybody says, yeah, sure, yeah, I get it. Next. But that is so big. Like the
It's
idea is
hard. It's hard. It's easier said than done. It sounds intuitive, but it's hard.
with the idea is at the end of this first step, you'd figure
Mhm.
out where should I be focusing.
Mhm.
And that takes some time, and it's about getting clarity,
Mhm.
and then getting your pinpointing those few areas that you should be focusing in on and getting clear. And that
Mhm.
requires you to basically look at all the opportunities that you have in
Mhm.
front of you in your life, which is really important, and to look at some of those kind of threats that you have, things that maybe are dangers to you,
Mhm.
and how can you eliminate those. That generally will lead you to a path that will help you know where to focus. And also it's actually looking inward and looking at your own personal values.
Mhm.
Some people have never really spent the time to think about their values, but money is a big amplifier. You talk about in your podcast, it's you like to amplify. Well, I'll tell you, the biggest amplifier I know, it's money.
Mhm.
If you've got some bad stuff going on in your life and you get a lot of money, an inheritance or something like that,
Mhm.
it will amplify all the bad stuff or good
Mhm.
stuff. So it is a psychological game, and I will tell you, finance is 80% psychological and 20% knowledge. So a lot of this is about getting your psychological mindset in play as well, and that takes a little bit of effort.
Where do you find, I mean, you've worked also, and we'll get into this in a moment when we talk about, WealthNet investments as well, but where do you find maybe people go wrong, or let's say kind of just miss the mark on this first step? Like, where do you find in your experience sometimes like, you kind of miss the mark on it in setting those?
Okay, I would say there's two primary things that we see a lot.
Mm.
There's that one person who is focused, who think they've already figured it all out, and they say, all I care about is my return. I just want a good return. That's it.
Mm.
Right? And or they'll say, all I care about is retirement, and they don't
Yeah.
really know what retirement is, but it's retirement, right? Uh, you
You
know,
want to retire. So tell me what you want to do in retirement. I want to retire. That's not an that may be something you can do, but like, what does your day look like? That's what you mean, right?
well, exactly, and then and retirement is not something in isolation.
Mm.
It's like you have family members, you have loved ones, you have other people involved in your life,
Good
hopefully,
point.
and that affects a lot of how you go about quote unquote retirement,
Yeah.
and also
Well,
financial
for
freedom.
example, in that, I want to build that out a moment just so somebody can understand. So let's say that, you're thinking you're going to retire at, XYZ age, let's say 60. And then maybe you're thinking about like your cash flow and other things, but maybe you have a mother to take care of, like, or maybe you have a father that you're going to take care of, and maybe they didn't plan for retirement quite as much. So are you also thinking about like what that expense could be with like these different generations and how what that looks like? Is that what you mean by that?
That yes, that and the what is actually bringing happiness and joy in your life.
Mm,
Because just that, saying I'm retired does not bring joy. Like somehow there's not this switch that's going to make your life better because you're retired.
yeah.
So actually the years that go up into that financial freedom, I call it financial freedom day, right? When you that point in time when all your assets work hard enough for you so that you don't have to work, you have the option to work. But for a lot of people, you still want to work, right?
Mhm.
Or you have some passion in your life. So I go through this whole concept of goal grading in the book, of how you can think about different areas in your life, and it's not burdensome. I
Mhm.
want to say there's like 8 little areas that you look at, but you just ask yourself a few simple questions in each one of these areas, and it generally will lead people to the path where they can get focused. Again, this is about focusing your energy, because you really can't take on everything in life that you want to do when you start thinking about your money. You've got to
Yeah.
get focused on what's going to move the needle, what is essential, and
Yeah.
that's really what that's about.
It's interesting because when you talk about these things, like, so when I had my finance hat on and I was a financial advisor before I was a business owner and running a media company, like before that, like I thought of it as one perspective, but as much as I see, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs that watch this show, by the way, a lot of executives, a lot of entrepreneurs, but when you think about some of the skills like setting goals, setting a plan, like all the things that you're talking about, like they translate into business as well. So when the comparison's made that I like that people do all the time is, that it's kind of like your life, to think of it like a business, right? And think about like the objectives, like that parallel kind of it's just very similar, huh?
It is very similar. It's similar from the standpoint, there's cold hard facts that you can put, like
Yeah.
numbers in goals. You always want to have timelines, like how long and how much money, like dollars and time. That's generally the two kind of hard things. But there's a lot of soft things that surround it as well. So you have to kind of get a handle on the soft part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean for my children? What does this mean for my spouse?
Mm-hmm.
And what are those considerations, and how does that enrich our entire life? Again, I always talk about peace of wealth into peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
because the amount of wealth you have is not your ticket to peace of mind, for one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
let's
obviously the more
um
the merrier, but
let's tackle another step. And I picked the first one. I said step one, like dealer's choice. What step do you want to tackle next? Because I do want to at least do another deep dive into another before we get into WealthNet investments and also how you're
okay.
working with clients.
I think analyzing your situation, that's step 3.
Let's
I
do it.
think that's a really good one to talk about, because this is one that I find that a lot of people tend to be a little bit, maybe can improve on.
Hmm.
So once you've gathered all your information, you kind of know what you want, right? And you've got organized, you got all your information together. It's really important to analyze that data in a way where you do a few things. Number one is that you look at the goals and you say, okay, now how do we go from where I am now to where you need to be?
Hmm.
That requires analyzing your opportunities and your strengths that you have.
Hmm.
So and making sure that you capitalize on the opportunities, make sure that you mitigate those dangers that are in your personal financial situation. And then it also requires you to crunch numbers. So let's just use an example. Let's say, let's just use the retirement goal, because that's
Yeah.
usually the primary goal. You generally, once you've done a needs analysis and you say, okay, given where I am right now and everything, I'm going to need a certain amount of money by a certain amount of time. And we're going to need to set a time frame. And how much is that money? And then how can I realistically get there? Right.
Hmm.
That's a really important part. And one of the things that's really tough in the financial world is inflation and taxes are brutal. They are absolutely brutal. We were just working on a financial plan for a very well off executive, and he works for a financial company. And I will tell you, the decision about how you take your money out is enormous. I mean, and there's some general guidelines that you can use, but like,
Hmm.
which accounts are you going to take money out of? And which account should I be putting my money into? And how much? How should I be splitting for every dollar that I'm bringing in?
Hmm.
How should I be splitting that money up? That decision process changes throughout your financial life,
Hmm.
and how you invest that money. Because here's the deal. I was talking to a client, another successful entrepreneur,
Hmm.
and we were talking about how important it is just how you invest. Because
Hmm.
if you don't have a good investment process, all the financial planning is worthless, because
Yeah.
you're not generating returns above inflation. So, and in order for you to do that, you have to be very disciplined. And that's a
Hmm.
whole nother area that we can get into. I'm a chartered financial analyst. Most of my career, I've been a money manager, right? And that's basically, at the end of the day, You need the plan, but you also
Mhm.
need smart investment management. You need,
Mhm.
I call it integrated investment management. That is investment management that integrates those goals and everything in a way that makes sense. And that requires
Mm.
an investment policy and a really good strategy and process.
Yeah, and for those that are watching that don't maybe know what a CFA is, you've probably heard of a CFP. Like a lot of people can be a CFP. I think it's wonderful. It specializes more so on the planning side of things. And I was a CFP certificate
Mhm,
holder when I was in the industry. So
mhm.
it's difficult, and it's one of those things that kind of I believe is a good accreditation to understand that somebody has a
Sure.
basic knowledge of planning. But CFA on the other side, that's for the individuals that get really very difficult percentages. I don't know what it is now, but basically most people that take this exam are not going to pass it. It's a very, very difficult exam. I used to call them, and Lewis is not prompting this, and I'm not getting paid for this, but I used to call them the special people. Like CFA was above my head. Like just I was scared of the test when I just saw how many pages of formulas that had to be memorized. I mean, it's a ridiculous exam beyond the scope of this interview, but Google CFA if you want to know more about what we're talking about there, and then
So
you love it at me.
I think it's like 1/3 of everybody who takes it passes level 1, and then
Yeah, it's
there's 3 levels. So if you multiply point 0.3 times point 0.3 times point 0.3, that'll tell you like for every person that goes through, they actually get through all 3. So but that's really not the point because
yeah.
you need that technical knowledge.
Mhm.
And thank you for mentioning that. But yeah.
One thing that I did want to bring up about it, and circling back to the point, but I wanted to tee it up. So
Mhm,
getting back to that, there is a difference, and you don't have to give a specific example, but maybe just kind of to clarify the concept. There is a reason to put one particular type of investment in one investment account, maybe versus another. So maybe one type of investment, whether it's an individual stock or a particular mutual fund, is going to be in a retirement account versus a non-retirement account. Like if we keep it high level there, I just want to make sure that the audience understood that it does even matter not just what you're invested in, but where it's invested.
yeah, so there's the investment structure,
Mhm.
which is like what's the best way for me personally
Yeah.
to structure my investments, and that has a lot to do with what your opportunities are. For
Mhm.
example, if you work for a company that allows you to have a Roth 401k
Mhm.
and a regular 401k, then you have that opportunity. It may or may not make sense for you, but
Mhm.
to analyze that structure for you, depending on your
Yeah.
age, your tax bracket, etc. So all these little things that you have in front of you,
Mhm.
and everybody is different. So that's the structure part. That's why I
Mhm.
keep saying it has to be integrated. You got to structure things right so that you're being efficient and effective with every dollar that comes in, and you're putting them in the right places in the right
Mhm.
proportions. But then there's that next step, which is okay, now they're in whatever structure
Mhm.
we're in. How do we best invest within that structure? What's available to me? And one of the things that happens a lot is people have these 401ks, and 401ks generally have limited amounts of selection that they can choose from.
Mhm.
Many of those investments are highly correlated, and so there's not a whole lot you can do in those types of accounts many times. But if your company offers a 401k where you can actually self-direct,
Mhm.
let's say at Fidelity or at Charles Schwab, then you can do something much, much better for yourself, and you can be much more customized. So
Mhm.
these types of things so you have to have both disciplines, both planning
Mhm.
and investing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it makes a difference. And I think this is a good transition to actually move on over and let's start talking about Wealthnet investments. So maybe start
Mhm.
off by just telling us a little bit more about the firm.
Okay, so I started Wealthnet Investments, which is a registered investment advisor. We're located in Colorado. I started the company because I used to I was a senior portfolio manager for a large company. I was an analyst for a hedge fund. I did
Mhm.
trading. I even did algorithmic programming before it was kind of a cool thing to talk about. But coding. So I've been in all aspects of the I guess the financial world. Not all aspects, but many aspects.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've noticed, the larger, the more prestigious the firm name, the
Mhm.
more I realized that there was all these. I don't know another word to use, but conflicts.
Yeah.
There was all these conflicts that were keeping people from realizing their potential, like
Mhm.
just the way it was set up. So for example, I'll just use an example in my world. I was a senior portfolio manager, and the objective is to make good risk adjusted returns, and we were tracked and scorecarded on what we did for customers and for our clients. But on one hand, there's like scorecarding on risk adjusted returns, but on the other hand, it's like, but we want you to put a certain percentage of the money in these products that we just so happen to we started these companies, whether it be a hedge fund type product or something like that. And the larger the firm, the more prevalent I found that to be. And so I really wanted to start a company that was independent, unbiased, and driven by clients and what they need. Charge a reasonable price for that service that includes both planning and investing in a smart way. And so we invest in a way where we don't buy a lot of packaged products that are put together by Wall Street. We like to invest directly because we can kind of get rid of a lot of the middlemen fees and own stocks, for example, directly. And we can have diversified portfolios that are smartly invested and tailored to people's needs. So that was really what drove me, just my passion for, obviously we talked about my passion for, helping people turn their peace of wealth into peace of mind, and also my fascination with investing in the economy. But the overall idea is to not be like the typical Wall Street firm, but actually deliver more directly to the clients what they really need and not have those conflicts. So we're completely independent. We don't have proprietary, incentives.
Yeah. And it's really tricky. It's really tricky out there. So I know the independent firms out there are really disruptors. And what I mean by it's tricky is it's not saying that, people at these large companies don't want to help their investors or their clients. It's just that sometimes you're operating in a model that doesn't always allow you to do your best work, which it's nothing against the companies either. So meaning those companies, I mean, some of it's just legacy. If you think about it, I'm not going to pick on any particular firm, but let's just say that, you started a mutual fund 20, 30 years ago, and it was the best in that first decade, maybe even 15 years of existence. And now you wake up one day and you have, $500 million in that mutual fund. You can't just shut it down because it's no longer one of the best.
Exactly.
It's legacy. You have clients in there, but
that's true.
So it's not saying that you have to. And I just wanted to clear that up. And that's not what Lewis is saying.
That is not what I'm saying. It might have sounded that way.
It actually didn't. It actually didn't, Lewis, at all. It did not sound that way at all. The only reason I bring that up is just so that people that are watching this understand that there's good people on both sides of the fence on that one. And you didn't sound like that at all, by the way, Lewis. I just always like to let everybody know that they have options. And this is where I'm going with this.
Exactly.
Normally what happens is, when you think about something like a mutual fund, that's just a product. That's just a product that was made up. Sometimes that product may work and be the best thing. Maybe it's not. And so in my opinion, when you think about whether or not to explore an independent firm, a lot of times, like what you just mentioned, Lewis, and I'll let you go further on this, but just the idea of having a customized approach or having somebody that has an ability to look at your situation a little bit more and isn't necessarily working off of just a matrix, let's just say, where they can't necessarily go off matrix or some of those things. Maybe talk a little bit more about your process.
I could talk about the process of investment process, you mean?
Just know the process on how you work with your clients. So we don't have to get into deep investments, because for that, by the way, just for disclaimer for everybody watching this, for that, you want to call Lewis, because then because every person's going to be different. Everybody's going to have a different situation, but no, just how you work with clients, just in general.
Sure. So when somebody new comes in, we just have an introduction call, and we just really want to know more about them. And we do what's called a vision builder. And that basically is asking some basic questions so that we can understand more about the client, more about what your needs are and what your desires are, some of the things that you're facing, what's most important right now. And then we just try to see if there's a basis for us to help you. So my overall philosophy is that we should be providing 10x value. So we don't want to work with people unless we feel like we can provide 10 times more value to them than what we are receiving in fees. So that's really the assessment. Is it a good fit? And based on what we do and based on what the client needs. And if it's a good fit, then what we do is we have kind of a discovery where people will they basically upload a bunch of documents, and then we analyze that information. So basically what we're doing is we're following the 7 steps that are on this book.
Mhm.
And it takes, generally it takes 3 meetings at a minimum for people to go through that entire process. And then there's ongoing monitoring, which is also part of the process, is the ongoing monitoring part of it. By the way, that is probably, it is the most important part of the process in the end, because
Yeah.
as time goes on, people's situation changes,
Mhm.
or the economy is changing, opportunities and risks change, and you must be adapting in order for you to maximize your wealth. So it's really important that monitoring is part of the thing,
Mm.
part of the whole process. Yeah.
So, Lewis, you mentioned you have a podcast. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So the Market Call show, every Thursday, we have an interview or I do a monologue. And we really want to talk about things that affect really 2 types of people. Number 1 would be the high income, not rich yet group of people. So there's a lot of people out there that, make it a pretty good income, but not financially independent yet. We find that those people have a lot of questions. And so we want to answer questions and talk about things that are related to them. The second group would be people who are like nearing retirement. They're 5, maybe 10 years away from retirement, and they've got to make some big decisions now to make sure that that retirement goal is actually accomplished well.
Yeah.
Questions about, what about my pension? What about my Social Security? There's a lot more complexity involved with people who are, getting towards that end part of their career and wanting to retire. So those are the 2 basic people that we talk to, and we have interviews with all aspects that affect those groups of people. It could be a discussion about things in your career, or it could be a discussion about, what is the best way to deal with the college part, education for your children. Or it could be something about what's happening in the Ukraine, and how I just did a monologue this morning about what's happening in the Ukraine, what's happening in the investment markets. And this is something that I spend most of my time doing, by the way.
Yeah.
What is happening with the valuations? Where are the opportunities? Where are the risks? So, and we want to talk about things that will help people make smarter investment choices
Yeah.
and be aware of what's going on. So that's basically what the podcast is about.
That's awesome. I'm a big fan of supporting podcasts and podcasters. We'll definitely put links in the show notes so that our audience can go check out the show. So, Lewis, I mean, busy guy, books, podcasts, obviously your clients, running a portfolio, a lot on your plate. I just have to ask, what's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for the book promo, the podcast? I mean, the firm, what's next?
Well, I'll tell you, the next thing right now is to continue to communicate with people about our mission, how to, turn that piece of wealth into peace of mind. So right now, I'll be doing some book signings. That's coming up pretty soon. I'm also going to be speaking in Charlotte for an event. I've also got, there's a lot of things on the plate as far as that goes, but at a higher level, what's really next for Wealthnet Investments is to continue doing what we're doing and to get better and better at it. Because basically, I believe that you have to keep your head down in order to be successful. And we don't want to keep our eye off the ball. And the eyes that we want to stay focused on those essential things. What do our clients need? What is happening in the marketplace? What are the risks and opportunities? And what can we do better for our people? So we have a lot of things related to that internally, as far as that goes, but we're really working on the podcast more. We are also going to be allowing people to get a signed copy of my book. We have a special link for that. That's pathtorealwealth.com/shop-books. And so we want anybody who's listening, if you want to get a signed copy, go to that link and do that. So we're going to be getting the book out to as many people as possible to help people really with those 7 steps to get going and making sure that you're on track. Because, shifting gears just a little bit, I got asked to speak to high schools for one high school in particular, actually, to teach financial literacy. Because you know what? So many kids are graduating from high school and they don't know enough to make basic good financial choices. So I'm giving the book away for free to some kids, and to help people move forward. I think every single child who is in high school should have to take a financial literacy course.
Absolutely.
My daughter my daughter was on the podcast. She came up to me with her cell phone and she said, "Dad, I need to interview you for school." And just right then and there, she starts interviewing me. And so we did this interview and we decided to put it up on the podcast.
Yeah.
So you might want to check that out. My daughter's awesome, Elisa. She's actually quoted in my book because she says things that are like, "Wow, that was brilliant. Okay, cool. I'm going to write that down, Elisa."
That's so good.
She's 15, so.
That's amazing. 15 got the debut on the podcast. She's gonna have the next one. I can already see it. Like from like her dad.
She's a talented one, and so is my son LJ. He's very talented as well. So yeah, he's an economic thinker. He's a lot like me from that standpoint. He likes to think about big picture and economics. And
oh, that's awesome. Well, Louis, I just have to say, really, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today, learning more about your background. I mean, we share very similar backgrounds and just in general financial literacy, also in terms of finance and just like our passion for getting the message out there, wanting to help people with it and just to educate them. I mean, a lot of the things you're doing, of course, you have a firm, you help people directly, but a lot of the things that you're doing, you don't have to do. You don't have to do a podcast. You don't have to give away all this content for free and to send out books and to teach at high school and do things like that. Like you don't have to. Like you've been blessed and you're going out there and being a blessing too. And I'm excited to have you in our Mission Matters community and to have collaborated with you on this. So in terms of how people can connect with you and just follow up, whether it's about the book, I know you mentioned that, maybe leave the web address one more time and just the overall website, how people can continue the dialogue. What's the best way for them to do that?
So yeah, I would get a signed copy of the book. Go to pathtorealwealth.com. It's shops/books. So that's it's easy to find. And then also, if you ever have any questions, you can go to our website, wealthnetinvest.com. And up on the top, there's a little button that says schedule a call. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer any questions for you. The other thing is check out the Market Call Show. You could go to marketcallshow.com and check out the podcast.
Perfect. And we'll put all those links in the show notes so that our audience can just click on the link that matters to them most and head right on over and check it out. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time engaging with or listening to the Mission Matters platform, just to let you know, we're all about bringing on entrepreneurs and executives and individuals that really have a mission that like really fires them up, that makes them want to go out there and go into the marketplace and to make a difference in their chosen profession. If that's the type of content that interests you or excites you, we definitely welcome you to hit that subscribe button because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Louis, again, it really has been a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure, and it's good because you've been in the industry, so you had some good questions. I appreciate it.